There are souls who disappear into quiet rooms, not because they hate the world, but because the world became too loud to hear themselves think. They close the door, turn off the noise, and for a moment, the universe narrows to a single heartbeat. It feels like peace, but sometimes peace has a hidden cost. We live in an age where movement means meaning, where busyness is mistaken for purpose. So when someone chooses stillness, the world calls them lazy, distant, strange. But what if that silence isn't emptiness at all? What if it's the only place where the truth can finally speak? You see, the need to be alone is not weakness. It's an instinct, ancient and sacred. When the noise outside becomes unbearable, the mind retreats inward, like a wounded animal seeking the forest to heal unseen. That's why some people fall in love with their solitude. Their home becomes more than walls and furniture. It becomes a mirror. In that mirror, they don't have to perform. They don't have to pretend. They can finally breathe without the pressure of eyes watching. But solitude is not just comfort. It's confrontation. When the world goes silent, your thoughts grow louder. Your emotions stop hiding behind routine. And the questions you've been avoiding, about who you are, what you've lost, what you fear, they start whispering again. Most people run from that. That's why they fill their days with noise, their calendars with plans, their minds with distraction. Because silence doesn't lie, it reflects. Yet for a few rare souls, that reflection isn't terrifying, it's liberating. They find a strange kind of strength in being alone. Not isolation, but awareness. Not avoidance, but awakening. They start realizing that solitude isn't the absence of life, it's the presence of self. Still, there's a fine line between peace and escape, and that's where this story begins. Some people don't choose solitude, it chooses them. Life bruised them in quiet ways. A betrayal that cut too deep, a job that drained the soul dry, a relationship that left echoes louder than words. And so one day, they stopped running outward and began to drift inward, toward the only place that didn't ask them to explain: home. To the outside world, it may look like withdrawal, but in truth, it's an act of survival. When the mind has been torn apart by too much noise, stillness becomes medicine. Silence becomes oxygen. And four walls become something sacred. A sanctuary where pain can unfold without judgment, without performance, without the need to smile when nothing inside is smiling. These souls learn the art of retreat. They dim the lights, light a candle, and let the body exhale what it's been holding for years. Outside, life demands constant motion. Inside, they can finally stop pretending that they are okay. But there's something powerful that happens in that quiet. When the world stops demanding, you begin to hear the faint pulse of your own heart again. You start remembering the person you were before you were broken. You begin to rebuild, not with noise, but with presence. It's in this silence that many realize how much of their identity was built on expectations and exhaustion. They start to peel those layers off, one by one, until what remains is raw, simple, real. But the healing home is a paradox. It gives comfort, yet it tempts you to stay forever. It nurtures your wounds, but also whispers, "Don't go back out there." The longer you hide inside your refuge, the more you risk mistaking safety for peace, because peace heals, but safety isolates. And slowly, the same four walls that protected you begin to feel like a cage padded with memories. Still, for those who have walked through pain, home will always hold a certain magic. The quiet sound of dishes in the sink, the hum of a lamp, the scent of old books and coffee. Tiny, grounding details that remind them life can still be gentle. If you've ever closed your door and felt that soft relief in your chest, you understand. Healing often starts not with movement, but with stillness. Not with words, but with the courage to finally listen. And when the world feels too heavy again, these souls know where to return. The refuge of the wounded, where silence holds them until they're ready to rise. Some people aren't hiding from the world. They're listening to one the world can't hear. Introverts carry a compass that points inward. When the room grows loud, they feel their energy drip like water from a cracked vessel, not because they dislike people, but because their attention is a delicate flame and crowds are wind. So they retreat to keep the fire alive. At home, attention becomes spacious. Thoughts stop colliding. breath slows, and in that calm, they discover what most never touch, the texture of their own mind. They don't need constant noise to feel alive. They need meaning. They need signal, not static. There is a rhythm to the quiet ones. It begins with small rituals, clearing a desk, setting a cup of tea, opening a window for a ribbon of breeze. These gestures are not trivial. They are incantations. They tell the nervous system, "You're safe, you can unfold now." And with safety, something opens, a library of inner rooms, each with a door the world cannot see. Creatives know this library well. They don't go home to avoid life. They go home to build it. A melody appears in the distance, a sentence flickers at the edge of the mind, a color insists on being painted. Creation is a visitation. It rarely speaks over chaos. It prefers a quiet host. In solitude, they enter the river called flow. Time unhooks from the clock, the chatter dissolves, and what remains is a clean, bright channel through which something larger than the self can move. That is why they guard their rooms like temples, not for isolation, for transmission. Yet the creative room is not always soft. Sometimes the silence becomes a mirror that refuses to flatter. The page stays blank, the instrument waits, the canvas stares back, and they must sit there anyway, long enough for honesty to arrive. It does. But only when they stop reaching for applause and start reaching for truth. The quiet ones carry another gift, perception. They notice the way afternoon light turns a wall into a gentle fire. They hear the tremble in a voice before the words confess it. They feel when a conversation is genuine and when it is a performance. That sensitivity can ache in the noisy world. At home, it becomes sight. So they curate their inputs like a gardener curates water. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to keep meaning alive. A single deep conversation over 10 shallow ones. A long walk that answers questions without language. A book that doesn't shout, but changes the architecture of the mind. There is a myth that solitude makes you smaller. For the quiet ones, the opposite is true. In solitude, they expand. They grow roots into time, backward into memory, forward into possibility. They braid their private hours into something that can hold weight in the public day. The world calls it staying home. They call it building foundations. But even foundations crave sky. The danger arrives when the room becomes everything, when the same ritual that opened the soul begins to close the world. A gentle border hardens into a wall. A preference becomes a rule, and the flame they protected from wind forgets what wind feels like. So the quiet ones must practice a second art, returning, not to noise, but to contact. To the small human frictions that polish meaning into wisdom, the touch of weather, the brief exchange with a stranger that reminds you you're not the only story unfolding today. The simple courage of leaving the perfect conditions to meet imperfect life. Because creativity is born in solitude, but it matures in relation. Ideas forged in the inner library must eventually step outside, to be tested, refined, contradicted, completed. Without that encounter, even brilliance can curl inward and sleep. The inner worlds are precious, guard them. But remember, a temple is not a tomb. It was built for entrance and exit, prayer and return, and that thin line between sacred peace and silent captivity is where the next truth waits. Every sanctuary has a shadow, and the longer you stay inside it, the harder it is to tell where peace ends and isolation begins. At first, it feels pure, almost holy. You wake up to silence, make your coffee, feel the stillness holding you like an embrace. No expectations, no noise, only you. But soon, that silence begins to echo. You start hearing the faint hum of thoughts that sound too familiar. Maybe I don't belong out there anymore. Maybe I'm better alone. Maybe this is enough. It happens slowly. One cancelled plan becomes two. Then a week passes without sunlight touching your skin. Then you start calling peace what is, in truth, withdrawal. Because isolation wears the mask of serenity. It speaks softly. It convinces you that you're safe when you've only stopped living. And that's the paradox. The very thing that once healed you can, without movement, become the thing that breaks you. Human beings were never meant to live in extremes. Too much noise and you lose yourself. Too much silence and you forget the world exists. The mind needs both, the mirror and the window, reflection and exposure, stillness and motion. Without one, the other becomes poison. Some of the most peaceful people you'll ever meet once mistook comfort for purpose. They built walls to keep out pain, and those walls kept out joy as well. Because life does not ask to be controlled, it asks to be felt. And feeling is messy. It demands risk. It demands friction. But that friction is what reminds the spirit it's still alive. Sometimes when you've been quiet too long, the silence starts talking back. It whispers in your sleep. It fills your thoughts with static, not because it wants to hurt you, but because the soul is built for expansion, and expansion can't happen behind closed doors. The universe doesn't evolve in comfort. It evolves through movement, tension, collapse, rebirth. And you are made of the same law. If you never leave your peace, it will decay into a comfort that suffocates growth. If you never face the storm, you'll never know how strong your stillness truly is. So the balance must return. Peace must remain a resting place, not a permanent address, because the same silence that restores you will consume you if you refuse to answer its next call, to step back into the world carrying that stillness within. When peace becomes a prison, it's not the world that's locked out, it's you. And the key is movement, even if it's small. A walk at dawn, a single conversation, a glance at the horizon. Life doesn't need you to run. It just needs you to show up. Because silence was never meant to end in isolation. It was meant to teach you how to listen, so that when you return to the noise, you can finally hear the truth beneath it. There comes a moment when the silence inside you starts to overflow, not with words, but with readiness, the kind of quiet that no longer needs to hide. It wants to move, to share, to breathe in open air again. That's the art of returning. It doesn't happen through force, no sudden epiphany. It begins in small steps, humble gestures that say, "I'm ready to meet life again." You open the window. You let the light touch your face. You walk outside without a destination. You feel how the air holds you differently now, as if the world has been waiting for your return, but only when you were ready to meet it as yourself. Returning isn't about leaving peace behind. It's about carrying it with you. The goal was never to escape the world, but to learn how to move through it without losing your center. You are not abandoning your sanctuary, you're expanding it. Your calm becomes portable. Your solitude turns into presence, and the noise that once drained you now flows around you without entering. Because the real test of inner stillness is not found in isolation. It's found in motion. Can you stay grounded while the crowd moves around you? Can you listen without absorbing every emotion in the room? Can you remain soft without being fragile? That's mastery. When you start to return, you realize the world hasn't changed much, but you have. You begin to sense the hidden rhythm beneath the chaos, the small miracles that were always there. A laugh in a coffee shop, the sky breaking open before rain, the texture of another human voice. They feel new again, as if life was waiting to be noticed properly. This is the paradox of solitude. You go inward to find what was always outward, connection. Because connection without self-awareness leads to exhaustion, and solitude without connection leads to emptiness. The two are halves of one sacred circle. One refines you, the other reveals you. Both are needed to stay whole. To return is also to forgive yourself for disappearing, the world for being loud, life for being unfinished. Forgiveness is movement disguised as peace. It lets you step forward without dragging the past behind you. It's not about erasing what happened. It's about no longer letting it define the shape of your silence. Some people think awakening happens on mountaintops, but often it happens at the door, when you turn the handle and step outside with the same calm you once had inside. You realize you don't need the perfect conditions anymore. The world is noisy, yes, but you've learned the difference between noise and truth. And truth is quiet, even in the storm. Returning doesn't mean losing what you've built within. It means proving it can exist out there, under the sky, in motion, alive. The story always begins and ends in silence. The same silence that once felt heavy now feels alive. Not an absence of sound, but the quiet rhythm of awareness pulsing beneath everything. You no longer fear it. You've learned to listen. Home is still there, but it no longer owns you. It's not a fortress, it's a foundation. And every time you walk back through that door, you bring a little more of the world inside with you. A conversation, a lesson, a piece of sunlight caught in your hair. Your sanctuary is no longer a boundary. It's a meeting place between stillness and movement. That is the balance. To rest without escaping. To move without losing your center. To love the silence, but not let it replace the music of life. People often think peace is found by removing things. Less noise, less contact, less risk. But real peace is different. It's not fragile. It doesn't shatter when the world touches it. It endures because it flows. It expands because it bends. It's the kind of peace that breathes with the world, not against it. When you reach that state, you stop craving extremes. You stop calling stillness your identity and chaos your enemy. You start to see both as teachers, one showing you who you are in solitude, the other reminding you who you are in connection. And somewhere between them, you meet the soul you've been searching for all along, because peace and presence were never opposites. They were lovers, long separated, finally learning to live together again. So now, when the world gets loud, you won't run from it. You'll breathe through it. You'll return to that inner room that no wall, no noise, no chaos can touch. That is your true home, the one you carry within. And maybe that's what solitude was always trying to teach you. Not to disappear, but to remember. Remember who you are when the world goes quiet. Remember that silence is not emptiness, but depth. And remember that the door between your peace and your life was never locked. It was waiting for you to open it from the inside. If this reflection spoke to something quiet in you, stay close. There are deeper truths waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe and walk with us as we keep remembering the unseen.